Breath of the Wild offers a strange kind of promise. You're exploring a world that is fundamentally ruined, yet you keep bumping into the ghosts of your own history. You find the stone layout of a ranch which felt like home. You find the discarded clothes of a man you once rescued. But in this desolate landscape, these things, they feel wrong. The first location we want to look at has sparked a lot of fan speculation. The Great Plateau is an isolated cage and a perfect tutorial for Hyrule to come. It is a microcosm of Hyrule, containing everything to come. But to leave it, you must first master the rules of survival, and Mount Hylia, which sits on the western edge of this space, acts as our first encounter with a truly hostile climate. The green grass abruptly gives way to deep snow, and the temperature plummets. The game doesn't teach you anything, and walking into the snow unprepared results in a slow, inevitable death. The mountain forces adaptation to survive. You must cook spicy peppers to raise your core body temperature. You need to carry a lit torch, and you must learn that the environment itself is a lethal enemy. Climbing the sheer rock faces to the summit is a test of early game stamina. Reaching the peak offers a brief rest from the hard climb, and the old man, from the beginning, waits at the highest point. Speaking to him secures the warm doublet, which solves your struggle against the cold. Stepping past him reveals a solitary grave beside the summit. The old man is keeping vigil over a solitary grave tied to Breath of the Wild's opening tragedy. This grave is the resting place of King Rome Bosphoramus Hyrule, the last monarch of Hyrule, which is now a kingdom in shambles. 100 years ago, the calamity struck. The king trusted ancient Sheikah technology to protect his people, but that technology was completely hijacked, and the kingdom fell in a single day. King Rome perished during the calamity. However, a question remained: where was his body? The placement of this burial site is greatly intentional. The grave offers a panoramic, unobstructed view of the ruined Temple of Time, and beyond the plateau walls, a dark, swirling mass of malice wraps tightly around Hyrule Castle. The grave places us where the king once stood, looking toward the ruined kingdom he could not save, as he is trapped, looking at his literal greatest mistake. So we like to believe that he guides Link out of a desperate need for atonement. His own spirit remains permanently frozen in the memory of his fallen kingdom. His body rests at the king's tomb of Mount Hylia, while his spirit remains on the Great Plateau long enough to guide Link out of it. The Great Plateau preserves the memory of Hyrule and its deep history, but when you walk into the Gerudo Desert, you will learn that there is a place that actively erases the history of Hyrule. To reach it, head into the Gerudo Desert. The temperature shifts from freezing nights to blistering days, and the terrain is flat, hostile, and constantly shifting. Buried beneath this endless ocean of sand, we find the Arbiter's grounds. The area seems familiar because the veterans of the franchise recognized the name immediately. During the Twilight Princess area, this was a colossal stone fortress. It was a maximum security prison designed to hold Hyrule's most violent criminals, and it also housed the Mirror of Twilight. But the most interesting part of this area is that this is also where the ancient sages attempted to execute Ganondorf before banishing him to the Twilight Realm. The structure represented the absolute authority and ruthless justice of the Hylian royal family. Breath of the Wild strips away all of that grandeur because the desert swallowed the architecture entirely. The prison is completely gone. The chambers and execution blocks are missing, and only a few fragmented stone pillars protrude from the dunes. The game changes the area completely. A massive Molduga swims through the sand exactly where the prison used to stand. The beast treats the ruins of Hyrule's justice system as a simple swimming pool. This boss fight forces you to use the remaining stone pillars as safe zones. You stand on the crumbling remnants of an ancient prison wall to avoid being eaten. The prison has been reduced to a few pillars, and the Molduga treats those ruins as ordinary terrain. Hyrule's old justice system no longer means anything here. The justice of the ancient sages mean absolutely nothing to a Molduga. Another direct callback to Twilight Princess can be found near Lurelin Village. Hidden within the Palmore ruins, close to Palmore Beach, stands a mysterious circular monument strongly resembling the legendary Mirror of Twilight. The central feature is a big circular stone monument, violently fractured into pieces across the sand. An obsessed villager named Garini stands staring at the pedestal. He tasks Link with hunting down the missing fragments. After Link photographs all 3 fragments and shows them to Garini, the full inscription can be reconstructed. For a veteran, The visual parallel triggers an immediate assumption. The circular frame and jagged fractures immediately suggest the Mirror of Twilight. The initial instinct is to identify this as the remains of the Mirror of Twilight. In Twilight Princess, the mirror was an artifact of catastrophic magic. It served as a dark gateway, bridging the world of light and the Twilight realm. Its presence on this beach implies a dark connection bridging the eras, but examining the lore shatters this illusion completely. The Mirror of Twilight was an ancient link between the worlds, left behind by the goddesses and guarded by Hyrule's sages. It was housed exclusively within the execution chambers at the peak of Arbiter's grounds, within the Gerudo Desert. However, Palmore Beach sits on the exact opposite end of the southern continent, along the coast of East Necluda. At the conclusion of Twilight Princess, Midna annihilates it. By shedding a single tear, she dissolves the entire artifact into pure light, permanently severing the connection between the realms. She possessed the authority of the Twilight Princess, and she destroyed it entirely. She left absolutely nothing behind for anyone to find. The monument buried in the sand is a pale, flat stone engraved with standard terrestrial script. It is a lock. The ancient text demands a physical action. Link and the NPC must simply kneel in reverence on the glowing pedestals. This action forces the Kaya Shrine to rise from the earth, so the supposed legendary silhouette is reduced to a standard puzzle door. This spot exposes a vulnerability in Hyrule. Breath of the Wild presents a Hyrule hollowed out by a buried history, so the player spends hundreds of hours wandering through a vast graveyard. The game leaves many of those questions unanswered, and the community fills the gaps. The true legacy of the Twilight era is cemented elsewhere, but on this beach, there is no dark magic. The player is staring at a fragmented rock, inventing a history that was vaporized centuries ago. If you love what we are doing here with the channel, please drop a like and subscribe to help us make more of these videos. Hyrule is a large map, and the sheer scale of Hyrule hides its own structural scars. Most strange places in Breath of the Wild invite you to solve something, but this one feels like a loose part the game forgot to explain. A place such as the pond at the summit of Ubota Point in Faron is the exact perfect example of this. Swim to the water's edge, and you find a metal door submerged at the bottom. It is a standard reinforced slab, so you can lock onto it with magnesis, heave it from the mud, and flip it against the rocks. It behaves exactly like the barricades used in forts across the map, but it guards nothing. There is no chest hidden in the silt. There is no secret cave entrance. There's no Korok puzzle triggered by its movement. It is a functional object trapped in an area with zero utility. It feels jarring. Most of the items in Breath of the Wild are deliberate. They are placed to force you to think, to climb, or to solve. This door sort of just sits at the top of a mountain peak, miles away from any structure that would require a door. This is most likely a developmental remnant though. During the build process, designers frequently place dummy assets to test physical interactions. A developer likely intended to hide a reward beneath this door during an early stage of testing, but the reward was moved, the terrain changed, and the door was simply forgotten. It is a design choice that never made it into the final product. Another theory we have is that it is an ancient of the engine. The game populates the map using libraries of recycled assets. A system, or perhaps a developer working quickly, dropped a standard door into the pond's coordinate data. Since it sits in the water and doesn't break the physics engine, it never triggered a bug report, and it was ignored until the final build. To me, this looks like a loose asset that survived into the final build, which honestly makes it stranger than a normal reward chest. Even Breath of the Wild has corners of the map that were left abandoned and unresolved. Mecca Island is an empty stage. It's easy to assume that every inch of Hyrule is a gift, that if you climb the mountain or swim the river, you will eventually find a chest, a spirit orb, or a memory. Breath of the Wild teaches you to be greedy. It rewards your curiosity with constant validation. But then there is Mecca Island, which tells you otherwise. Navigate the dense, foggy maze until you reach the northern edge. Here, surrounded by water, sits a tiny elevated circle of land, the Mecca Island. The geography here is too clean because the island is perfectly circular and it features a single twisted dead tree at its center and a scattering of bone piles. In any other corner of Hyrule, this place would be a promise of a reward at the end of a challenge or a puzzle. Here, you expect a Korok to pop from under a rock or a chest to materialize from the mud. But when you land on the shore, the game's combat engine snaps into place. Style enemies crawl from the dirt. You fight. You survive the elemental arrows and you clear the island of every threat. And when all the enemies die, the music dies too. But there are no rewards for you at the end of the challenge. The island remains exactly as it was, a pile of bones, a dead tree, and total silence. Mecca Island is a masterclass in anti-reward design. By the time you reach this point in Breath of the Wild, the mechanics have conditioned you. You are trained to assume that every weird spot has a payoff, but Mecca Island and its challenge have no reward for you. As generous as Breath of the Wild usually is, with nearly every ruin offering a secret, Mecca Island does the opposite. It tells you clearly, and without apology, that the map does not exist for your convenience. You can fight, you can survive, and you can solve the problem of the island, but the island doesn't care. But the map demands you move further. On the nearby Ebon Mountain, you find the mirror image, a broken heart-shaped pond. The name itself invokes mourning. The geography here is jagged, asymmetrical, and visibly fractured. While the first pond is lush and full of life, this one feels colder and scarily isolated. These two areas are the exact opposite of the Bota Point door, or the emptiness of Mecca Island. Those were accidents, but these ponds are intentional. The intent lies in the proximity. Both locations exist in the same regional orbit. The developers ensured that any player who discovers the whole heart will eventually stumble upon the broken one. This spatial connection forces a narrative twist. The discovery of the second pond retroactively changes the meaning of the first, and all that depends on the player. Hyrule never explains the connection. The player decides what the two ponds mean. In most open-world designs, boundaries are meant to be invisible. Designers use massive cliffs, oceans, or dense fog to keep players away from unfinished assets, but Mount Agat doesn't have any of that. The Gerudo Highlands are a wasteland of jagged ice and blinding wind. You spend your time here fighting the climate and your own stamina. Looking toward the northwestern horizon, one peak commands your attention, Mount Agat. It sits in the distance, a serrated tooth of rock against the sky. The map labels it clearly, making it a centerpiece for the entire region. The mountain is a landmark that sits on the path of any adventure, pushing to the extreme edge of the playable map. You decide to reach the summit, and you trek through the deep snowdrifts. You scale the vertical faces, and every climbing rule keeps working until the final steps towards the summit. The physics of the climb holds up. The map seems to stretch out, inviting you to conquer the peak and claim the view from the top. You are fully committed to the climb, but as you take the last few steps forward, the map stops you. A hard text overlay appears. You can't go any further. The screen freezes your movement and the music keeps playing, but the climb is over. This is the boundary. Most open world maps hide their edges with fog, endless oceans, or sheer unclimbable walls. But Nintendo placed a named, jagged peak outside the playable zone. You can stare at the peak. You can map it, you can name it, but you can never really climb it and conquer it. The next area hides a dark part of Hyrule's history, which changed it forever, essentially. Travel north of the Hyrule Plain. The rolling green landscape ends abruptly. The earth tears open, dropping away into a jagged, suffocating chasm known as the Breach of Demise. The atmosphere here is sharp. All the greenery dies around it. The ground is barren, rocky, and consistently hostile. The location looks like a wound cut into the landscape. Its canyon walls are jagged and twisted, with skull-like shapes visible inside the breach. The name is a callback to Demise, the main villain of Skyward Sword, the earliest story in Zelda's official timeline. In the lore of Skyward Sword, the first appearance of Demon King Demise was marked by a dark, fateful day. The earth cracked wide, and malevolent forces rushed forth from the fissure. Standing in the center of this canyon, the visual similarities become difficult to ignore. The Breach of Demise is a deep, raw tear in the earth. It looks like the ground was forced apart by something trying to claw its way out from beneath the crust. Breath of the Wild does not offer a codex entry. It provides no cinematic flashbacks to verify that this is the origin point of the first evil. It gives you only the name and the site of a broken landscape. A missing answer gives the name its weight. By placing a location with such a heavy specific name in the center of the world, the developers force you to engage in the history of the game. You walk through the chasm and you find yourself reconstructing the legends. Whether the developers intended this to be the literal site of Demise's invasion, or simply a poetic reference to the fragility of the Earth, the result is the same. The Breach of Demise, alongside many other places, turns Hyrule into something with myths and legends. It makes it feel heavy with a history that predates the ruins you currently inhabit. You are standing in the wreckage of a legend, and the ground remains silent on whether the demon is still watching. The next location in Breath of the Wild references another legend in the series, and this one is a little light-hearted compared to the others. West of what's left on Castletown lies the remains of the local prison. It is a cluster of collapsed stone cells and rusted iron bars. It is a typical abandoned prison, and it looks like an area of forced isolation and human suffering. In the days before the calamity, this was the end of the line for the city's criminals, but now it is a small pile of debris, indistinguishable from the other wreckage of the capital. The structure was destroyed when the Guardians activated, and the prisoners trapped inside must have had no chance. You come here to harvest. The northern and southern ends are littered with the rusted, inactive remains of the very Guardians that leveled the facility. You strip them for ancient springs, shafts, and screws. You scavenge the killers to feed your own advancement. This area has a bunch of things, like an ancient arrow and a knight's bow too. But the most interesting one is at the top in the metallic chest, buried in the mud at the center of the ruins. You open it expecting a weapon or a shield, salvaged from what's left. Instead, if the Master Trials DLC is installed, you find Tingle's shirt. The reference is a direct nod to the Wind Waker, where Link frees Tingle from the town jail on Windfall Island. This meant as a nostalgic joke for the player, but in the context of Hyrule and Castletown Prison, it is absolutely absurd. If you think about what Tingle really is, you will see the absurdity. He debuted in Majora's Mask, and he's a 35-year-old man in a green skin-tight bodysuit who genuinely believes he is a reincarnated forest fairy. He spends his existence drawing maps, muttering his catchphrase, Ulu Limpa, and trying to swindle rupees from everyone he meets. Deep in the Elden Mountains, among the volcanic peaks, lies a colossal ribcage-sized skeleton. The skeleton looks wildly out of place in a volcanic range, especially because its scale and shape resemble a Leviathan. For a creature this size to exist here, the geography of Hyrule must have shifted violently. It suggests a time when these mountains were submerged, or when the world was flooded by an ancient cataclysm. You are standing in the wreckage of a planet that no longer exists. Many fans link these remains to Leviathan, the sky-faring deity from Skyward Sword. If this theory holds, then the gods of Hyrule were real creatures who lived, walked in Hyrule, and died. Finding the remains of a deity being used as a shelter by moblins and bokoblins implies a total collapse of the old order, that it is a dead era. The Elden Leviathan is just the beginning. The developers put all three near the edges of the map, almost marking the outer reaches of Hyrule. Travel to Hyrule's northwest corner, into the Hebra Mountains, where permanent blizzards surround the second skeleton. The environment changes the nature of the relic. In Elden, the bones were scorched by the heat. In Hebra, they are preserved because the Leviathan rests in a silent subterranean tomb. The cold has kept the structure perfectly intact. The cave looks as though Hyrule was split open and left to scar. You stand in the ice, surrounded by the stillness of an alpine grave, and the isolation feels intense. You are at the absolute limit of the map, miles away from the main quest, in a place where Breath of the Wild expects nothing from you. The next massive skeleton is the Gerudo Great Skeleton, buried in the extreme southwest. You are in a sweltering, waterless wasteland, staring at the bleached ribs of a creature that looks like a whale. You see the dunes and the heat haze, and then you see the skeleton of a whale. These three skeletons, Elden, Hebra, and Gerudo, form a triad that frames the playable world. The developers placed them at the extreme borders of Hyrule to bait the curious, because they knew that players would ignore the markers for Ganon and the path to the castle to see what lay at the edge of the horizon. The skeletons don't belong in volcanoes, ice caves, or sandpits. Their presence suggests that Hyrule may have once had vast oceans or creatures that lived in the sky. That is, before the land shifted into its current shape. We spent this video digging through the seams, the remains, and the places that do not fit. That weirdness is part of why Breath of the Wild works so well. If you want to see how Nintendo built an open world that people still study years later, watch this video next.